The most insane hostage situation ever. Gladbeck hostage crisis. The Gladbeck hostage drama, as it is known across Germany, is a scar that is still present in the collective memory of the country. This is because two young people who were being held as hostages died. The police let the situation get completely out of hand, and because the media, which had unprecedented access to a crime as it was being committed, interfered with the efforts of the police to bring the situation to a peaceful resolution. Gladbeck was an entirely novel scenario for the police, and it was, of course, also an entirely novel one for the media. Even the German media referred to it as the darkest hour for German journalism post-World War II. Welcome to Bad Things. It all started on August 16, 1988, at a Deutsche Bank branch in the Gladbeck district of West Germany, when two armed men entered the bank and took two employees hostage. As the hostages and culprits stayed inside, the police and journalists continued to arrive at the site. The bank robbers stated clearly that they wanted 300,000 marks in ransom, the key to the bank's safe, and a BMW 735i automobile as a getaway vehicle when the police established contact with them. Due to the perpetrators' repeated threats to kill the hostages, the police had no choice but to wait and prepare to meet the men's demands. 7 hours later, additional armed police arrived at the site with the ransom money, and it was placed in front of the bank's entrance. One of the hostages, a teller at the bank, was sent out to retrieve the bag while wearing a rope around his waist or chest. During this period, a number of radio stations and television news networks spoke with the robbers, presumably using the bank's communication infrastructure. The man who answered the phone agitatedly told them that they planned to hold the hostages as insurance and intend to take them with them. 4 hours later, after nightfall, the German police finally send a getaway car, but it was a white Audi rather than the requested BMW. As the automobile slowly left the area, with one of the culprits aiming his pistol directly at the windscreen, all the television news networks broadcasted the event live. The two thieves were Hans-Jürgen Rosner and Dieter Degowski. By the time he reached his late 20s, Rosner had committed countless robberies and burglaries and served a total of 11 years in prison. In August of 1986, while on parole, he vanished and went into hiding at his sister's home. The next year, he moved into an apartment in the Rentford Nord area with his girlfriend, Marion Löblich, and her adolescent daughter, Nicole. The police intended to arrest Rosner on August 16, 1988, the day of the bank heist and hostage-taking, after receiving information from his ex-wife regarding his location. As a child, Dieter Degowski, like Rosner, was subjected to domestic violence, which caused him to acquire a violent and antisocial personality. The two met in a primary school for children with special needs. In his early teens, he often committed small offenses such as theft, and was jailed for the first time at age 15 for stealing sedatives. Later, he began stealing automobiles and acquired an addiction to alcohol and Vesparax. In 1983, Rosner and Degowski met again when they shared a cell for 8 months at Verrill prison. Shortly before the August 1988 bank heist, Degowski agreed to be Rosner's accomplice on the condition that they would use the stolen funds to set up a vehicle recycling company in Munster. To ensure the safety of the captives from the armed criminals, the police had officially suspended the manhunt, but were informally trying to monitor their activities. Their trail was picked up the following day when they were seen in front of a business in Bremen after they had evaded police efforts overnight. By this time, the thieves had changed their getaway vehicle and an unknown woman had joined them. Later, she was identified as Marion Irma Löblich, Rosner's girlfriend. After several futile efforts to rent a vehicle in Bremen, the two men and Löblich boarded a bus with 32 people, taking them hostage. The bus terminal was overrun by journalists. Some journalists took photographs inside the bus itself. Rosner, armed with a firearm, held an impromptu news conference on the street. Eventually, the bus departed, bound for Hamburg. It later stopped at an Autobahn service station when the two bank hostages were freed, and Marion Löblich, Rosner's girlfriend, went to the restroom. A frustrated police force made a catastrophic miscalculation by apprehending Löblich as she exited the restroom. Realizing that she had not returned, Degowski gave an ultimatum: bring her back within the next 5 minutes, or he would shoot a hostage. Degowski shot Emmanuel De Giorgi, aged 15, in the head after the police missed their deadline. He died after 2 hours of hemorrhaging. Fearing more hostages would be killed, the authorities freed Löblich. The bus resumed its journey, and in the early hours of the morning, crossed the border into the Netherlands. Here, the fugitives abandoned the bus and boarded a BMW supplied by the German police. Two passengers, 18-year-olds Silke Bischoff and her companion Ines Voitel, were loaded into the car and used as hostages. Just after 0700, they entered into West Germany again. Once in Germany, they took a break at a pedestrian area of Köln, where they are once again surrounded by police, journalists and civilians who had come to see the event unfold live. Dozens of journalists and bystanders press against the vehicle. The microphones and cameras of journalists were inserted through the open windows. Silke Bischoff responded to a reporter's queries with a faint grin while a pistol was held to her throat. Degowski, visibly impaired by the booze and amphetamines that had kept him going, bragged that he has already murdered someone. Rosner reiterated his mantra that they are not going to surrender. By this time, the majority of news organizations and journalists around the country had built a relationship with Rosner, conducting interviews with him wherever they stopped. As they delivered coffee to the criminals, reporters maintained an air of indifference despite the escalating tension and severity of the situation, and Degowski's increasingly desperate appearance. But Rosner's tolerance would soon be exhausted. He insisted that the crowd disperse and leave, or he would shoot as many people as possible. The crowd dispersed, and Udo Robel, the editor-in-chief of a local newspaper, willingly boarded the vehicle to help the criminals with instructions out of Köln. Despite Robel's obviously unusual and unnecessary decision, the German authorities eventually acknowledged that he had courageously prevented a carnage that Rosner and his accomplices may have perpetrated if they had been trapped within Köln. Robel was in the vehicle for almost 40 minutes until they reached an Autobahn service station. He was told to exit the car and watched as the BMW left back down the Autobahn. 54 hours after it began, the drama abruptly and violently concluded a few kilometers further down the Autobahn. The police finally received the order to attack and ambush the BMW by ramming it from the side. A gunfight broke out. After the dust had subsided, photographs show Rosner and Degowski shackled with their noses to the asphalt. Marion Löblich was caught as well. Ines Voitel had scrambled to safety in a roadside ditch. However, there was nothing that could be done for Silke Bischoff. She received a chest wound from Rosner's revolver and died at the scene. This event is notable for the ineffectiveness of the police and the bizarre attention-getting tactics of the media. It is possible to claim that both fatalities might have been easily averted if the police had prepared and planned their ambush and handling of the incident correctly. In reaction to the acts of the media, the German government has prohibited journalists from interviewing criminals in the midst of a crime, and independent efforts to mediate in a hostage situation is also prohibited. The callous behavior of the journalists went as far as footage of a TV reporter prepping for an interview and observing that Degowski has his revolver on his lap. Should the pistol be pointed at her head, he inquires of his cameraman. Every moral boundary had vanished concerning journalistic integrity in this case. On 22nd of March 1991, the Regional Superior Court of Essen found Rosner and Degowski guilty and imposed life sentences. Löblich was given a 9-year sentence. In 2002, the higher court in Hamm decided that Degowski was guilty of a very serious nature, and his sentence was increased to 24 years. In 2004, the same higher court denied Rosner's parole application and sentence reduction request. The court also imposed a state of preventive detention. Thus, it is doubtful that Rosner would ever be released at the conclusion of his term. Dieter Degowski has been freed from jail and is now living under a new name. Hans-Jürgen Rosner still remains in jail under precautionary detention.